Hello everybody, and in this edition of UFTA we are going to talk about further Fenderdoodle functions. In previous videos we've gone over the versatility of Fenderdoodles, what some of the rules are. But this is again, I want to emphasize the fact that this is not canonical stuff. It's not in the official rule book that I've created, but it is a small detail that people can hammer out on their own, in future versions of UFTA, amendments and other alterations, just so that UFTA always remains viable, fresh, and topical. Okay, so what we want to do then is take a look at these Fenderdoodles. Currently, they only serve one purpose, and that is as protections in the market to keep crops from moving, and it confers that benefit. Okay, they confer that benefit. But what we're going to explore now is the possibility of Fenderdoodle expansion of functionality, and that's going to entail the possibility of placing Fenderdoodles on resource shop items. Okay, and if I do that, I do it in the same fashion as I do as if they were normal Fenderdoodle placement. Currently, Fenderdoodle placement is restricted to die roll 2, but I think in this future conception of UFTA, the idea is the Fenderdoodle will be available on die roll 4. And that's pending. I want to stress, all of these ideas are good to float around. None of them are set in concrete. And, with your participation and feedback, insight, and advice, this becomes everyone's project. I created UFTA for everyone on the planet to enjoy. And your input and value and advice are part of the creative process, right? So I can't really do it without you. And if you're ever wondering, how come there aren't copies of UFTA everywhere, that's part of it. I can't physically make UFTA without the aid and assistance of others. That's what makes it unique, I think. That's what makes it a totally egalitarian, almost utopian idea, because it requires the input of many people. Okay, so anyway, what we're going to do is these Fenderdoodles are going to be placed on resource shop items, but they can only be placed on die roll 4 and 2. Okay? And here's the difference. It doesn't cost anything financially to do this, but it does cost an action. It costs an action to place the Fenderdoodle. And you'll recall that all Fenderdoodles begin as babies, right? They begin as primordia. And so when you place your Fenderdoodle, it's going to be placed sideways. Okay? And that costs an action. Now, if you want your Fenderdoodle to be an adult or a hyphal, it's going to take another action to do that. So now we've spent 2 actions placing it on the disc. And you're probably thinking, well, what does that do? What difference does that make? What, am I blocking the disc? Well, no. What's happening is the Fenderdoodle is actually worth 5 tokens as a baby and 10 tokens as an adult. And what it's doing is it's adding to the cost of the item that it is protecting. Okay, so the disc, if a baby is added, it's going to cost 15 plus 5, or 20. And if it's an adult Fenderdoodle that's promoted, it's going to cost 25. Okay? Now, Fenderdoodles can be moved on die roll 4. And so if you don't like what you're seeing, there's no sense of ownership with the Fenderdoodles. I want to establish that now. But each grower is allotted 2 Fenderdoodles on their farm to begin the game. So you'll notice that the number of Fenderdoodles in use depends on the number of growers or players that you have in the game. But once a Fenderdoodle is deployed, it is no longer the property of the person who distributed it. Okay, What it is, in fact, is kind of like a public utility, if you remember Monopoly. You know your Monopoly. It's a public utility. And so you can move it on your turn with die roll 4. But again, it's going to cost you an action. Fenderdoodles can be promoted, or they can be moved, or they can be demoted. Okay? And so if you don't like what you've got, if you find that a Fenderdoodle is hampering your particular progress in your game, you can take steps to move it with die roll 4. Okay. Now again, that is tentative. It might expand to die rolls 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So that's something to bear in mind as well. I haven't decided. I'm just trying to figure out what's the most fun. You know, what creates the most pleasurable outcome for the widest distribution of people, right? That's the goal we're going after. If that sounds a little bit philosophical, then it probably is. If you've taken any philosophy courses, that's kind of the idea. We're trying to avoid pleasure and moving toward, I'm sorry, trying to avoid pain and moving toward pleasure. So that is the ultimate goal of UFTA. That's why one of my major goals and motivations is trying to share it with you, everyone in the world, if possible. So, you know, there's so many cultural language barriers out there that it can be pretty overwhelming and time-consuming and difficult to get it out there for everyone. Now, not only that, but I do want to just let you know on a personal note that UFTA is also not mass manufactured because of question marks regarding pollution. You know, we could make thousands of UFTAs together, which is great, but are all the materials in it environmentally friendly, right? Whereas previous hypercapitalists and world dominators haven't had little regard for the environment, or especially leaving something for the future. UFTA wants to think that it's setting up everyone for a brighter future if we can overcome the problems, the environmental and ecological concerns of a mass-produced board game. So anyway, that's something to bear in mind. I haven't figured out all the problems. I don't have the expertise in these fields to know. But as soon as I do have a better grasp of what's going on, then I can assure you UFTA is going to make it to you at some point. So just have to bear with old guys. Okay, so anyway, the Fenderdoodles can be distributed on die rolls 4. The other possibility for Fenderdoodles is to enhance the flavor, basically, of the crop. You're enhancing the productivity and the desirable traits and aspects, desirable properties of the crop on the farm. And so what's going to happen is, you know, on die rolls 4, again, you can deploy a Fenderdoodle on your farm. And you do that by placing it in the field. Again, if you use one action, it's only going to be a baby, and it's going to be worth 5 tokens. If you make it an adult, it's going to be worth 10 tokens. Okay? These are the values that are going to be added to the crop at the time of its harvest, provided that the Fenderdoodle stays put on there through all phases of production. Okay? So once the Fenderdoodle is removed, probably by someone else, or by adversities, or by sabotage. Once it's been removed, you no longer get the bonus. Okay? So each grower has to decide on die roll 4s whether or not they want to take the extra actions to deploy the Fenderdoodles in the first place. I can't answer that for you. It's a conditional problem that each person must face on their own and weigh weigh the pros and cons. Okay, so I think that's going to do it. I'm just going to do a few practice rounds so you can see kind of how it goes with the new Fenderdoodle functionality. All right, so everybody got 5 tokens. All right, so let's just take a look. Let's say we've already passed the, we're on shard maybe. We've already scored some tokens. Let's see what happens here. So here's a 2. Already I'm confronted with the possibility of Fenderdoodle placement. Notice that Fenderdoodle placement on die roll 2 is free, whereas if it's on die roll 4, it is not. It's an action. And that's because productive farm rolls 4, 5, and 6 are meant to be action-oriented turns. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's play spinach. I'll be right back. Okay, so here we go. Gamble. Oh, we already rolled that. Okay, so here's a 5. No Fenderdoodles, but we'll just be productive. Now, the question arises, should the Fenderdoodles be deployed on 4, 5, and 6, or should they be restricted to die roll 4? Currently, I don't know. I think it's okay to say I don't know in this day and age, and so I don't really know. Not without extensive testing, which, maybe robots can do this now. Who knows? But as far as I can tell, it's uncertain. There's just no way to know. Okay, haven't gambled, just not gonna gamble. Alright, so here's our first 4 of the game. And this drawer's already expended a Fenderdoodle. Now they're trying to anticipate, depending on where you're at in the game, you want to try to anticipate if perhaps you could take a resource shop and bump up its price, or you could stick on the farm. Notice that you have to commit it to a field before you know exactly what's going on. So that's something where your field analysis and self-evaluation are going to come up, and you have to make that decision on your own. Okay, so actually I don't get to do this because if I if I place an adult Fenderdoodle, that means I've taken up 2 actions. Because not only have I placed the baby, I've also promoted to the adult. So I've promoted to an adult, and I'm going to stick with that. That takes up my entire turn. No tokens were spent, the 2 actions were. Here's a productive roll. Just keep going up. Potatoes. There's another die roll 2. There's a 1. 2 crops. Potatoes, carrots. Alright, so here's another 4. One of the possibilities, this should be stated, is that once a Fenderdoodle is deployed, I'm thinking that it needs to stay on the board, and it needs to be available to all growers to manipulate or move, promote or demote by them. And so in this particular instance, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Fenderdoodle. Because it's a baby, we'll just take it. Now notice, here's something important. Only baby Fenderdoodles can be moved, which means if you're going to move a typical Fenderdoodle, it's typically an adult, it's going to have to be demoted and then moved. Okay, so that's a very important point to bear in mind. I assume we're going to keep it this way, but it seems to make sense from my point of view. So what we're really doing is we're moving the Fenderdoodle, and that costs an action. And then we're going to place it over here on another crop, because we might want to perform a 2-crop combo. And, whatever bonuses and benefits apply toward the Fenderdoodles, toward the crops ultimately that the Fenderdoodles are placed on, those benefits will apply, especially when you're talking about earning ooftas in the market, or if you're just doing the regular scoring of 2, 3, 4 crop combos, right? All that additional score gets added in. So that's another great reason to have these Fenderdoodles. But again, they cost you actions, and so you have to kind of weigh the benefit there of, delayed gratification and making long-term investments, long-term goals. All right. So here's the 6. Cultivate harvest potatoes. 6. There's a 1. Remove 2 crops. Carrots, beans. And gamble. Alright, so now this grower has an opportunity to deploy Fenderdoodles, and they're going to place their Fenderdoodles on the disc. They're thinking they don't need the disc. They're going to go after the harvester, but since the disc is such a popular item, they're going to place the Fenderdoodle there. Now, there's been some question as to whether or not these Fenderdoodles should have a kickback that goes to their grower, because maybe this extra funds that it's worth should go to the original person, okay? And to me, that sounds like a wonderful idea, but the problem is, you write things down on paper, they sound great, and then you try them out in the real world, and it's awful. And so this isn't an awful case, but the idea is when you place these Fenderdoodles, the problem is now you have to keep track of who owns which Fenderdoodle. And I don't have an easy way to track that. I could paint the Fenderdoodles and color coordinate them according to the mushroom colored icons on the fields. But that's an extra step in production, and I'm not sure it ultimately is worth it, right? Just on a personal note, I can tell you this was extremely difficult to put together, very difficult to get everyone on board, and even just make these prototypes. And so it's a tremendous question mark as to whether or not the extra production is worth it. So for now, we're just going to say that the extra funds just go back into the bank after the grower has paid. So anyway, they're placing it on the disc. So now we've got one resource shop item under threat. We've got 2 in the fields. And 2. I think we'll use our 2 and we'll protect one of their crops in the market. So this in total gives you a wide range of the diversity of the Fenderdoodles in action. Here we're adding costs in the resource shop. Over here we're anchoring crops into their position in the market, right? And protecting against dire rule 2. And then here in the fields, we're adding value to the product by protecting it from adversities and sabotage. That's the other function of the Fenderdoodles when they're in this position. If you play these adversity cards on them, let's see if we can find it here. Turn through cups. Remove all crops from the field. That would only apply to the items on the top, or at least 3/4. With the flood card, it happens to be 3/4. But most of your adversities remove 2 crops from the field, and you wouldn't have to do that. You only have to remove your Fenderdoodles. So they serve the same role and function as marker tokens. You can still place marker tokens as well on your assets in order to protect from the elements and from just general calamities from others. All right, so that's going to do it for me. Until next time, keep on playing Ukta, and I'll see you again. Bye, everybody.